listening to the 10 Questions with the Musical Mind podcast with your host, Peter Harris.
Hello everybody, Peter Harris here. Welcome back to 10 Questions of the Musical Mind. I appreciate you tuning in to us today. Today we're joined by a legendary hard rocker. This is the man who was with Quiet Riot, Ozzy Osbourne, Dio, Whitesnake. He's currently with the Guess Who, and he's been with so many bands and done so many projects, I can't even list them here. But not only was he with those bands, but he was with them at some of the peaks of their careers. This is the man that played on the Mental Health album for Quiet Riot, which went to number 1 on the Billboard charts. This is the man who was with Whitesnake on the 1987 tour, that massive album. And of course, he appeared on the subsequent Slip of the Tongue album. And not to forget, this is the man who toured with Ozzy Osbourne for the Blizzard of Oz tour with the legendary Randy Rhoads, and of course the subsequent Diary of a Madman tour. This guy's got so many stories to tell, and of course I'm talking about the one and only Rudy Sarzo. Before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody that of course there is our main online presence, the Peter Principles. That's peters-principles.com. You can get additional info there and more content. There are several interviews that are not appearing on the podcast. They're basically written interviews and, of course, some original articles. So be sure to check that out, peters-principles.com. Now, when you're there, if you do need to do some shopping or Amazon-type stuff, I highly urge you to go to our Amazon link. We are an Amazon affiliate. So it doesn't cost you anything. You just click on one of the links in the accompanying articles or on the store page. It doesn't cost you anything extra. Just if you click on that link and then do your shopping from there, it will send its pittance our way and help us stay self-sufficient. So we certainly appreciate that. So without further ado, let's get into our interview with Rudy Sarzo. Hey, Rudy, how are you today?
Doing terrific. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Peter?
Great. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it. You've got a lot of things going on as usual. But one thing I want to ask you about to start off with, I've seen the videos. I want to ask you about your new signature sawtooth basses.
Yeah, it's I own a few acoustic basses from different brands, and I've always felt that every time I would make a transition from playing electric to playing acoustic bass, there was kind of like a moment of adapting to the instrument.
Okay.
And when we designed the sawtooth bass, one of the main key issues we wanted to address was is to maintain continuity from actually playing an electric instrument to switching over to an acoustic instrument and have this exact same tension on the strings, which is very important for articulation. Especially, I find myself using acoustic basses in the studio, and there's really no time to adapt, because you're just like switching over. Okay, let's do a take. That's one of the main issues that we really address, and of course, price, quality, quality, the tone, everything. But that was one of the things that we really wanted to address with that. And also, I have a lot of acoustic basses that have 24 frets or 20, 21 frets, but the higher frets you can't really reach anyways. They're just like for cosmetic purpose, and that's another issue that we approach, was make every single fret reachable, easily reachable. So there's a flow in your playing, like you don't have to contort your hand to reach the higher frets, and also to have them sound musical rather than little pings, like ping, ping.
Right, exactly. No, it's very true. Because a lot of times you switch over to acoustic, you just instantly change your technique, even from string pressure to vibrato to everything. Yeah,
exactly. And it's most critical on the fretless because it's the most expressive.
Absolutely.
So that's another thing that we wanted to address, to make sure that there was no dead spots on the fretless bass. I mean, there shouldn't be any ways, but it's more critical and more noticeable on a fretless. So that's another issue that we wanted to address on actually a long scale neck, 35-inch,
Right.
neck. That is very unusual on an acoustic bass, but we just wanted to be different. We wanted to make the acoustic bass that has not been available in the market yet. And it comes out of the box with the latest Fishman preamp.
Okay.
And the various strings, acoustic bass strings, which is what I use on electric and acoustic instruments.
Gotcha. Now talk about your fret list. That's the one that interests me the most. I'm going to ask you a question, but I'm going to throw in a catch because I really don't know as far as your influences or who you admire on fretless bass players. Who are some of your fretless players, but leaving out Jaco Pastorius?
It's going to be a very short conversation then.
Right, but that's the most obvious answer for so many people.
Well, Jaco set the bar not only for fretless, but also for musicality.
Right.
For vocabulary.
But I'm just saying about the players you admire as far as fretless. It doesn't have to be it could be somebody younger than you or just...
there's the bass player for Brand X.
Yeah.
That his name, what's his name? He's been there he's a founding member.
So he's back there with John Goodsall and all those guys.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry because his name really escaped me, and he's one of my favorite bass players.
I know. He is great. I mean, I can immediately say Phil Collins and John Goodsall, and now I'm forgetting his name. I apologize.
But he's a founding member. He's been there from day one. Pino Palladino is another beautiful, fretless bass player.
Absolutely.
My dear friend Tony Franklin.
Yeah.
I was playing fretless back in the Ozzy days.
I know. Yeah.
If you catch any of the Diary of a Madman footage, that's the very little that is available live of us performing. It's kind of like there would be camera crews from the local news station would come down and shoot some B-roll for the main interview, and some of it was that. And during the Diary of a Madman tour was us performing live, like the first couple, 2 or 3 songs, and we used to open up with Over the Mountain,
right? And
I was playing fretless on Over the Mountain, mainly having to do because we used to tune down to E flat.
Okay.
Actually, and that I believe that was that. Yeah, the most of the Diary of a Madman record, except for one song, I believe it's SATO. It was all recorded E flat. Back in the early '80s, I didn't have the option of different string gauges when if you're detuning. So I was pretty much like, tuning down to E flat back then. My string tension was very loose, so it was not as tight. So I decided to use a fretless for that purpose. So I was not going to get fret noise.
Sure, that makes sense.
Detune. Yeah.
Yeah, you get those low strings just flopping against the fretboard. Yeah.
Correct.
Percy Jones.
Percy Jones. There you go. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, Percy.
Yeah, sorry, Percy. But no, actually, that's Pino Palladino and Tony Franklin are my all-time, of the more current guys. But his work with Paul Young, Pino's, and of course Tony. Actually, Tony really shone, of course, on the Firm, but I loved his work with Blue Murder and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But
absolutely.
So jumping back to the Ozzy days, I don't want to go for the obvious question right away. So I want to ask you, and of course you covered a little bit of this in your book, Off the Rails, but how chaotic was it when Bernie Torme was brought in? And the reason I asked that is obviously he was an accomplished musician, and everybody knows that he wasn't maybe the best fit. But we're talking about a time when a lot of guitar players were still catching up to the curve that Eddie Van Halen and Randy introduced. So when he was first coming on, were you having to help out on showing him was he even familiar with finger tapping? Was you have to say okay, well, Ozzy here was, toggling his pickup on and off, or he was, you know what I'm saying? Was it little things that he was like, what is he doing here? Or
yeah, actually the guy who took over that was our keyboard player, Don Airy.
Yeah.
Don Airy knew every single Randy solo because sometimes just for the hell of it, he would And I say hit for the hell of it because he was never told to do it. He just did it on his own.
Okay.
He would double Randy's solos because Randy's solos are so thematic.
Yeah.
That they rarely, if ever, diverted from playing what he played on the record.
Right.
So there was not a whole lot of jamming going on during the theme,
Sure.
the melodic solos that he played. You could actually whistle them, and so Don would actually double them. Again, not because he was asked to, but just because he enjoyed doing it. So he was aware of all the note choices and bends where they happen, So I am not. He might have helped,
right,
or guided Bernie, because these are things that would happen on their own, like on the side.
Right.
There's so much stuff going on, and the chaos was not because Bernie was in the band. No, the chaos was because Randy had passed away and wasn't there anymore.
Yeah,
so
that's
this
what I'm
is all
saying.
that's going on. So nobody who was coming in to play guitar. There was still the main chaos was not due to the guitar player, the individual being there. It was due to Randy not being there.
Oh yeah, that's. I'm by no means implying that Bernie was thrust into a chaotic situation. And,
yes,
and just did his best.
Yes, he was. Not too many players had picked up on Randy's rhythm technique, which is crucial to playing those songs. So how, and I addressed it in my book, how Brad got in the band was because Pat Thrall's brother actually saw Brad playing with the Alameda All-Stars, which later on became officially Night Ranger.
Right.
So, they were covering, they were playing covers around town. And so Pat's brother said, hey, this guy, these guys are covering Ozzy, Ozzy songs. And this guy was playing the technique. He knew how to do had the rhythm technique down.
Right.
And so that was like the main technique that was actually needed for us to be able to play the songs as they were recorded and composed by Randy.
Right. And, in retrospect, it probably made more sense. Brad was probably a better fit because you get somebody who's so innovative at the time like Randy. You probably needed a younger hotshot who was learning all those cut of the edge techniques as opposed to somebody who's had an established style.
Yeah, established. Yeah, and Bernie had a established style on his own.
Right.
And that's what he brought to the band. But like you said, in order for us to finish the tour properly, playing the songs the way that they should be played, somebody else would have been a better fit. Now, that's not taking away from Bernie Torme's original, his playing technique and vocabulary and professionalism.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's just comes down to the individual artist. It's like asking, Andre Segovia to play like B.B. King. It's just not.
Yeah. Like hey, listen, there was this other name, a guy who was a magnificent musician that just was not suitable neither. Just because, but again, it's like, if you have Jeff Beck come in and play those songs, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the right fit.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's yeah, totally. It's an artist, and each artist is different.
Yes.
Now, talk about your playing. Now, say you're in the room with whoever, a drummer and a guitar player. Somebody starts jamming on a brand new riff, and you've never heard it before. I'm curious, what is your very first instinct, like in real time, and you just are hearing these notes for the first time? Do you instinctively go to the root note and try to lock in with the drummer, or do you listen for a second and see what the guitar player is doing and see what notes you can play off melodically off him? I mean, like the very first thing you go to.
Yeah. It depends the reason why we're in the room.
Okay.
Is it, are we gathering to actually write a song, to work on a particular song? Then my approach is as a bassist, contributing to a composition. If we're just getting together for musical enjoyment, it's a whole different approach.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's more like getting all of us going outside the box.
Okay, right.
And it all depends. Sometimes I get together with people that don't have an extensive musical vocabulary. So it's like having a conversation with a younger person, let's say somebody who's a second grader.
Right.
So you can still have a conversation with them, but you choose your notes carefully or your words carefully.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. And you can still have a good conversation. It's just a different vocabulary.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of not only the skill level, but the purpose of what you're gathering to communicate with these other musicians. I know it sounds a little clinical, but basically, if you break it down, it comes down to that. That's why musically nowadays, we have the freedom to play in different projects where you're expected to bring in different tools and use different vocabulary and expand on your musicianship.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, that's great. Now talking about your creativity in general, do you stay current on 3D animation and computer graphics?
Yeah, I've actually laid back on that a bit because I'm focusing on music 100%. And there's a little sidebar to it. The reason why I started doing so much computer graphics is because my vision started to wear away.
Okay.
And wearing glasses was really not an option on stage. So I began playing by numbers, and I wasn't being fulfilled by playing that as much as I was, 10, 20 years before that, before my vision.
Gotcha.
Started to go. And then I got LASIK, and that changed everything for me. Okay. And all of a sudden I could see, all the strings really clear and the fretboard and everything, it just changed everything. So I got my passion for playing music, back.
Right. Isn't that amazing? I had to break down and get glasses a few years ago, and for me, it just declined so gradually that, I'd had 20/20, 30 years ago, of course, but when I first put on glasses for the first time, I was like, whoa, if this is 20/20, then what I've got ain't it. Like, you just couldn't believe, I couldn't believe how clear everything was. You just don't realize it over time for me. But
yeah, what's really, the first thing I noticed with LASIK, it was that I was not getting the same colors with the glasses as I did with my natural vision. Oh yeah, everything became sharper and the colors more vibrant. There is a prism effect that you start getting with your glasses, especially if you're out in the sun, the daylight. And without the glasses, that doesn't happen.
Right.
You're just getting the natural vision.
Sure. Yeah, I guess it's unavoidable to an extent. Yeah. Well, the reason I ask that is I know it's hard to keep up with the computer world. One of my good friends is in, computer animation and all that, and it's a constant struggle. If he'll be on a job for a couple of years and suddenly turns around and he's like, I need to learn 5 new programs and go through tutorials and get up to speed on this different software because you just can't stop.
One of the things that I did is because I had the support of certain software companies, and hardware companies, was that I started to I became part of a mentorship program from some of the top CG creators,
right,
content creators, and tutors, and one of the things that I really learned really quickly about the people who made a living working at a studio is that, for example, if you're working on a feature animation, you're going to spend 2 or 3 years working on just one character.
Yeah.
or maybe the clothing, or the hair of the character, or just moving the eyes or lip syncing. And I'm going like, oh my God, that would just drive me insane.
Yeah, there's no instant gratification there.
No, and because I was more interested in becoming a generalist, which is a person that, for example, everything that I did it on my own. It wasn't like like I just did the facial animation, the lip syncing of one character. I did everything. I started with one pixel and just created the model, and then texture it and
Right.
and the blend shapes and everything that came along with it. Creating all the environments and lighting and
Yeah, that's the
I
fun
mean,
part.
it's
Yeah.
basically yeah. I mean, you're basically playing God with this little creation that you did because you create a universe.
Right. That's what's so fascinating about it. Yeah. Now, going back in time again, and I told you, I warned you I'd like to jump all over. Talking about technology, I know Randy often on his solos, especially, would triple his tracks, and he would just
Yes.
play it 3 times, and he was so good at repeating his performance like that. I mean, just
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
to every nuance. I mean, you can tell if you understand, but it's by no means obvious. But it helped fatten out the sound. Now, if he was around to benefit from modern editing software, going with your gut, do you think that Randy would be inclined to make lossless copies of one take and pan them left, right, and center, or do you think he would still want to do 3 individual performances?
That's hard to tell, but I'll tell you this: when you listen to some of the live recordings, because we did,
Mhm.
let's say we did with Randy, we did three live. They were radio broadcasts, is
Right.
what they were, right? And Westwood One and King Biscuit,
Mhm.
and we would have our sound engineer, the guy who was running the board. Well, that night, every time that we did a radio broadcast, he would be in the truck mixing,
Right.
mixing the shows, right? And he would back in '81. That's when the Eventide, the harmonizer
Yeah.
came in. So it was not because Randy suggested it. The engineer took it upon himself to actually be able to duplicate that effect that
Gotcha.
Randy had used in the studio. Because a good engineer, what they would do, front of the house engineer, they will listen to the record and try to see how many of the dynamics and recording techniques that were used on the record to bring that into the live mix.
That makes sense.
Yeah, Chuck Wisner. Yeah, Chuck Wisner was our front of the house. He's no longer with us, but he was one of the top guys. I mean, it's probably the best guy at that, from that era.
Right.
That we had. As a matter of fact, we had him with Ozzy, and then with Quiet Riot later on when we could afford him, he was our front of the house guy too.
Yeah, and that's such an art unto itself. You have to have a good ear
Absolutely.
and pay attention to the nuances to know what to focus on. Yeah, that's
absolutely. He was he was the best of that era. Of the '80s, early '80s that I got to work with, and this is it makes or break a show because the audience, especially back in the day, they would buy a record, listen to the record probably on the way to the gig.
right.
Once they hear the live performance, they want to basically a reenactment of that studio
right.
experience to be performed live, especially the auditory portion.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially back in those days when that was your only representation of the band, other than seeing them live, was you had the one album a year or so, and there was no internet. There was no, and yeah, your only information was listen to the album, open up the gatefold, and look at the photographs. I mean, that was my only way of even knowing what the individual guitar players and musicians played that I like. I'm like, oh, okay, he's got a Les Paul. Okay, he's playing Pearl drums. That's
exactly. And that tour was one of the few one of the last major tours, Blizzard and Diary, that did not have the benefit of MTV, because that changed everything also.
Sure.
Especially the live videos. Let's say, like the Bon Jovi or any Whitesnake live video or anything like that. Quiet Riot sort of had like a semi-live video. And I mean, it's because we had an audience, but it was not supposed to be a live show.
Sure.
For Bang Your Head. or even Come and Feel the Noise. There was always like people who were actually the fan club that was a part of it. But later on with Whitesnake, we would bring the crew to shoot a live in an arena presentation.
Right.
And that was completely different. We did do a long form video for MTV. It's called Speak of the Devil. I mean, there's 2 Speak of the Devil Ozzy releases. Mm-hmm. There is the re-recordings of Black Sabbath songs that is purely a right. CD or an album at the time, a record. And then, but before that came out, on Halloween 1982, MTV broadcast a pre-recorded Ozzy live from Irvine, which is like the big outdoor venue at the time near Los Angeles, and that was actually the Diary of a Madman tour, but with Brad Gillis on guitar.
Right, and that so, album. Yes. Always, this is a random note. That album, going back as far as I remember, the album cover always drove me nuts because, not nuts, but I always thought it odd because with Ozzy, with his mouth open, and I guess it's supposed to be blood, I always look like a big hunk of grape jelly on his tongue.
Which probably was, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the Eventide harmonizer, and that brings me to another question because it's one person in particular I'm thinking of. I was going to ask, you've worked with amazing players, drummers, guitarists, singers. Mm-hmm. Was there a guitar player that you had to make significant changes in what you play based on their note choices? And I'm thinking of people like Steve Vai mostly.
Actually, it happened before Steve. When I started playing with Whitesnake, it was the first time that I had played with 2 guitar players.
Right.
And they were Adrian Vandenberg and Vivian Campbell.
Sure.
Now, I was on Vivian Campbell's side of the stage, and he had what was really popular at the time. This is 87. Mm-hmm. A Bradshaw system. Are you familiar with the Bradshaw system? Bradshaw system was basically a huge pedal board, and then you had a rack. A custom rack.
Yeah, everybody had a Bradshaw rack back then. All the big guys.
Yeah, but everybody had different components. They were, they were not all the same unless you, let's say you were a fan of Steve Vai and say, okay, I want to get exactly the same components Steve Vai has on his rack. I'm going to have it on mine. But that was a decision that you made. It's not like you go to
and you still weren't going to sound like him.
Yeah, it's not like nowadays you can go to a music store or order online a Helix by Line 6.
Right.
And there's presets.
Right.
With all other people's racks and sound. No, it wasn't. But still, it's the same concept of a Helix and a Bradshaw board. So the Bradshaw was like precursor to a Helix, And but the sound that Vivian was able to get, again, because these guys, Vivian Campbell and Adrian Vandenberg, they came from a 1 guitar player band.
Right.
That was the first time. Even Steve Vai, when he joined Whitesnake, he had come from a 1 guitar player, setup. So their sound, it was basically made to fill certain frequencies in the spectrum. They had to adapt to the frequencies, but where you play in the neck.
Sure.
Because if both, if you have 2 guitar players, one of them is playing, they're both playing the same position.
Right.
The same inversion. On the guitar, it's not going to sound as wide as if, one guitar player is playing, on a, 3rd fret, first inversion, and then the second one doing like a cage position,
That's got to be hard too to play a song for 10 years and then now I've got to play it in a different position because Adrian's playing the first position like I always play. That's got to be tough.
Well, it's for me as a bass player, I adapt really easily. That's not even an issue. As a matter of fact, I welcome it because sometimes you just get bored of playing the same thing the same way over and over again. So it's like, okay, this is cool. But when I joined Whitesnake, it was a complete different adaptation. I changed basses, pickups, amplifiers, frequency, EQ, everything, because I needed to fit into that small space that was available
Sure.
in the mid range frequency. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. But and really, when you guys went out on that tour, I mean, you were all amazing musicians, but you really hadn't played together as a group until the tour, had you?
No, we have. Yeah, exactly.
You're
No,
basically
it happened on the road.
yeah. That's pretty amazing. Of course, you had good material to work with. I mean, John Sykes wrote a monster album with that, but.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that was always a fascinating incarnation because, of course, props to Adrian Vandenberg, but Vivian Campbell's always been one of my favorite guitar players. I've really always liked his stuff, River Dogs and Dio and all that.
Yeah, phenomenal guitar player.
Oh
yes.
yeah. Now, was there a drummer you had to similarly adjust to that way? Like, I mean, you've worked with from Vinny to Tommy Aldridge. I mean, is there anybody who like at first, like, oh, this guy does fills in a way that I'm different than I'm used to. I need to watch my pocket, or this guy plays on top of the beat or behind the beat, or I mean, I'm sure you're used to adjusting different drummers, but
yeah, when I first joined Ozzy, Tommy changed everything because Randy had played. He wrote the songs, he recorded them, so Randy and Randy had changed from being Randy and Quiet Riot. But that was something that I haven't played with Randy before, and that was really a smooth transition for me to play with Randy again in Ozzy, because I was familiar with Randy, even though it was a whole different way of composing and playing guitar, and his choice of notes was completely different once he joined Ozzy than he did with Quiet Riot.
Oh, I thought it was a quantum leap. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I was familiar with Randy. I knew where Randy was coming from, even though he had traveled far into a whole different new musical universe. Right. But at least I knew I was familiar with his trajectory, where it came from.
Makes sense.
Whereas Tommy, with Tommy Aldridge, I had never played with a stadium arena veteran. I'm talking about, so by the time that I played with Tommy started with Black Oak, Arkansas, playing arenas back in the early 70s.
Yeah.
Maybe he might have been even in the late 60s, So Tommy's approach to playing was leaning forward, something that I believe he developed from playing shuffles a lot.
Okay.
Because Southern rock, there's a lot of shuffles in there, he did that with Pat Travers also, and he was just very phenomenal at playing with that leaning forward, which is, if you listen to Van Halen, that's what they did. Alex and Eddie, those two are so tight, leaning forward, not rush.
Right.
But just leaning forward. That makes it really exciting for the audience,
right.
Because it's a very up feel,
It is, and you're right, they don't sound rushed.
No, that's the art to it. And that it's like holding on to wild horses.
Right.
That are driving this coach, and you're just holding on to them. It's like they're leaning forward, and they're keeping, all the horses are going at the same pace, but they're all leaning forward. It's when it's right, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Because it's nothing more exciting than getting off the stage, having experienced that. And for the audience also. That's for the benefit of the audience. And so that was the first time that I had to adapt to somebody that was leaning forward, because as soon as Tommy joined the band, that changed everything from what was on the record.
Gotcha.
If you listen to the feel of the album,
right?
Blizzard of Oz or Diary of the Madman, you listen to those songs live, it's like, whoa, it's a whole different dimension. And that was mainly due to Tommy and the fact that Randy just went with it, because Randy naturally played like that. And I think there was a bit of adapting. I think he had to adapt a bit to the way that the record was recorded. Now, I'm not sure if it was done on purpose.
Gotcha.
during the studio, saying, somebody coming up and saying, hey, listen, I think we're maybe leaning forward too much on the record, and maybe kind of like bring it back and keep it more on top of the beat.
Right.
But if you listen to the best rhythm sections, English metal or rock rhythm sections, they don't play in front of the beats. Not even the most aggressive ones, which to me they were always like Ian Pace and Roger Glover.
Yeah.
Beautiful, rhythm section with Deep Purple and so on. And they're pretty much on top of the beat, even though they're playing really exciting and they're swinging. Ian Pace really swings.
Absolutely.
When he plays, even he's one of the most swinging metal drummers. So that was really different. I think that was a whole different. That's what to me made Ozzy's music relatable to an American audience. The fact that the American audience were actually used to that, playing in front of the beat feel, and that's, again, to me, that's one of the things that made Van Halen so exciting.
Right. Another English drummer I loved, classic English drummer I love, was Cozy, of course.
Yes, yeah, but even Cozy, even Cozy Powell?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, even Cozy, because I got to play a lot of Rainbow with Dio, and I listened to a lot of those records that Cozy played on, and he's on top of the beat. He's doing the double bass drum.
Mm-hmm.
Da, 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 da. He's not, because again, they're da 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 da. They're not tanka 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 tanka, which is what Tommy played. He did a shuffle, like even okay. Let's say if you listen to "Give Me All Your Love Tonight," the way it was recorded by Ainsley Dunbar, it was right on top of the beat. It even sounds like it's got a click track to it because it's right on so much on top of the beat.
Right.
By the time we were playing that song live, it was pushing. It was more exciting.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and listen to a live track of it. Yeah, a live cut of it from that tour.
Oh yeah, listen to it. I think we're still playing that at the Donington.
Okay, yeah.
Donington would be a really good example of us playing that song live. I'm not 100% if we were still playing that song, but
I'll look it up. Yeah,
that whole show is a really good representation of what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, I've seen it before. It's probably been a couple years since I've watched it. But what did I was going to say? I know. Talking about Tommy and Black Oak, Arkansas. Then you mentioned the Van Halen brothers. On another Van Halen night, did you ever ask Tommy anything about if you look at old video of Black Oak, Arkansas, and turn the volume down so you can't hear Jim Dandy and just watch Jim Dandy, you would not know that wasn't David Lee Roth just from the stage moves. I mean, it's just exact.
I mean, Tommy really didn't get to talk much about Black Oak unless I asked him something, just in passing, But yeah, he made that references. Yeah, Jim Dandy, David Lee Roth.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely patterned a little bit of his stage moves from that, minus the karate, maybe. But
but David Lee Roth. I mean, if David Lee Roth did not come around, somebody else would have to invent him because he was such a pivotal figure in the history of American rock.
I put him
there had to be somebody like him.
I put David Lee Roth. Yeah, I put him among the top frontmen of all time, easily.
Oh, absolutely,
absolutely,
easy.
Now, when you were recording the recent Guess Who album, "The Future Is What It Used to Be," were you guys recording it together in a studio, or were you, Dropboxing tracks to each other, or were you in a room together, and what main equipment were you using, you personally?
Yeah, well, this is what happened. It's an independent recording project, which means that there was no Initially, there was no record company involved, budget-wise.
Okay.
So the band, we have two producers in the band, and also happen to be songwriters and so on. And the genesis of the record came about because they were writing songs for other artists and decided, like, hey, we're in this band, the Guess Who. Why don't we just take these songs and
Right.
and make the Guess Who record instead of giving them to other artists, or bands. So that started like 2 years before I joined the band, because if you don't have a deadline and you really don't have a massive budget to work with, or the proper budget, it's going to take a while.
Sure.
You're going to do it, if you have a break here and some time there, and there's going to be demos being made because you want to spend the least time possible in the studio, because
Sure.
that costs money. So you want to prepare yourself, and changing ideas and rewriting. So the first bass player that actually started working on that record was the founding member,
Right.
Jim Cale, basses. And then Jim started to during that time, he started to thinking about retiring, and so they started getting for certain shows a sub. So the first sub one of the first subs that they got was Michael Devon, who is Whitesnake's current bass player. So he started subbing, and then Whitesnake started getting busy, so they started looking for another sub. And how I got in the band, Sash Jordan, the Canadian singer, I was touring with her in the Jeff Tate version of Queensryche. So we became really good friends and, hung out and so on. So she's married to Derek Sharp, who is the lead singer and guitar player in the Guess Who. So they were talking about, wow, we need to get a replacement for Michael because, Jim is not going to be available, and Michael's getting busy. And so Sass says, hey, why don't you call Rudy? And that's how I came into the picture. So by the time that Jim Cale officially retired from the band, I was the one that was tapped to be the permanent bass player. So, but in the meanwhile, Michael had recorded a huge portion of the record, and they actually went into Blackbird Studios in Nashville.
Okay.
With the whole band. And, it was recorded in the studio, basically live, everything done there. By the time that I did my 2 tracks on the record, and Running Blind, Baby's Coming Round, those are the 2 tracks that I play on. And by then, it was like the final 2 songs that they hadn't completed yet. So I did the tracking at a hotel in Dubuque, Iowa.
Okay. The rock and roll capital of the world.
That's right. We were doing a show opening up for Styx. And so the day of the show, I go in Will Ivankovic's room, which is he's the other guitar player and producer for the band, in addition to Derek Sharp, and I just cut those 2 tracks in the hotel room, and that's how we did it, because it was just like we were down to the wire. We had to deliver the record to now we had a deadline, and we had a label that was going to release it and all of that. So that's how it was done.
Okay, so by this point, a label's in the picture, and you got deadlines, That makes sense.
Yeah. Once you get the deadline, release date, and you get the photos, you get then everything. It's like now hurry up.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, once money becomes involved from the outside suits, then it's suddenly hurry up. Yeah.
Well, it's not just the money. It's that everything is done in quarters. Releases are done in quarter, and the last thing you want to do is to release an album around Christmas, because all the focus is going to be on the established bands and the greatest hits, all the packages. So you want to release a record like either the first or second quarter is ideal, because that gives you enough time to have the record out to promote during the summer tours.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So that makes sense for as far as greatest hits packages being released in the fourth quarter. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And Christmas records.
Yeah.
Christmas records.
That makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Yeah. Okay. That makes, I actually didn't realize that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest with you, it's done a little bit different today because of, technology has changed and a lot of the distribution is all done digitally. Mm-hmm. But some of the reasoning remains the same. You don't want to be going up against the big guns, and Christmas records.
Right. Yeah, that's entirely logical because I know the bands I've been looking forward to, and I know the album's coming out soon. This has been over many years, but I'm like, why did they release it on January 15th when they could have released it, before Christmas and gotten the benefit of the sales? But your explanation makes perfect sense. So, yeah, that's cool. Now, talking about, Off the Rails has been out for a couple years now. Do you think you'll ever write another book? I mean, because your career, you could write volumes on all kinds of different stuff that you've done. Is that in the cards for you? Is it too time consuming or?
Only one reason why I wrote the book. Actually, I wrote it about 10 years ago. Actually, it's counting. It's by 13 years ago, it was finished.
Gotcha.
And in 2005, I finished the book. The only reason why I wrote it was so I could answer the number one question.
Sure.
I get asked when I travel around the world, which is, what was it like to play with Randy Rhoads? And so instead of giving one or two explanations, I have 300 plus pages of it.
You should have called the book Here, Stop Asking.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah. No, I mean, no, it's just.
No, I know. Not Stop Asking.
I mean, very few individuals in my life have had the impact, career-wise and beyond that Randy Rhoads had, on my life,
Yeah.
And the least I could do for him was to actually tell the story of what I experienced with Randy.
No, it's an invaluable.
A lot of people want to know, and they must know. They need to know.
Yeah. Your book is an invaluable first-person perspective of that whole situation.
Yes.
I mean,
yes. So to fulfill the what I would do instead of writing a book, I turned initially to podcast. Yeah. Just like you have.
Yeah.
And the genesis of me putting together my podcast, which is called The Dash, was because I started to attend memorial, services for, my friends, colleagues, and people would get out there and say all these wonderful things about them. And I'm looking around and going, wow, wouldn't it be nice if this person was actually here to listen to these wonderful things that have been said about them?
Okay.
And I figured, why don't I just start doing a podcast where I could actually record, have an oral history
right.
of my friends, people that I admire, that might not be necessarily friends of mine, but people that I do admire, and just have it as a podcast and have it there for posterity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so valuable.
Because wouldn't it be great to hear Bach talking about, his, not just his compositions, but his life, and getting to know the person through their own words?
No, absolutely. And that's one of the things, I love about podcasts. It's saving it for posterity. Like, I'm getting to talk to you. I'm getting to talk to all kinds of musicians that I have followed for 30 years and just, been a huge part of my life. And A, it's thrilling for me, but B, it's just how cool to have a conversation with somebody and have that forever saved that you can go back to reference. And like, I listened to your podcast, the other day I was listening to your conversation with Doug Pinnick, and it's, on the Dash. And it's great because one, you have such good conversations and you can get a level of conversation that I can't get. Like, I've interviewed Doug in a written interview. But obviously, you two are peers in the music business where, Doug Pinnick is the nicest guy in the world, but you guys have something in common that I don't with him. And that makes for a deeper conversation.
And the way that I approach it is not only are we peers, but I am a fan.
Sure.
Which, I've been a fan of music longer than I've been a professional musician.
Right.
So
I would hope so.
And I will always be a fan.
Yeah.
You know, and to me, it's such a pleasure to sit down and really get in deep. You know, talking about everything that the person that I'm having the conversation with is willing to talk about. You know, because that's what makes up the music. That makes up their art. You know, I was watching Westworld.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm catching up. I was watching the final episode of the first season, which is the speech that what's his name gives before he gets killed. What's the
stop right there, because
yeah,
I have not watched it, but I will tell you that the original movie with Yul Brynner is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes.
So, well, and I've mentioned to my wife a few times, like, I need to watch this series. I know I'd enjoy it. So Rudy Sarzo says I should watch it. Okay.
You should, because there's nothing to do with the original. It's a whole different concept.
Gotcha.
You know, and Anthony Hopkins, he makes a speech,
mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to tell you what happens to him, but I'm going to tell you what he says, which has really very little to do with the outcome of that episode.
Okay.
But he said something. He says, you know, artists become their creation.
Hmm.
You know, and then he elaborates on that, and it's basically, you know, when an artist passes on, you know, Beethoven. Okay, Beethoven. When you look at the statue of him, he looks like a grumpy guy.
Sure.
But no, he's not you know, Beethoven has become his music, his creation. What do you know about Beethoven? What do you know about Beethoven's music? You know, all of that. And everything that comes along with it, right? That's what he's become.
Very true.
Not necessarily, you know, if was he gassy or was he grumpy? Was he dirty? Did he smell? Was he a nice guy?
Nobody's picture of Beethoven is him laughing at a joke.
That's right. It's not about the individual anymore. It's about what he created. You know, and it's basically the same thing for us. So we should be very careful as creators. You know, I'm talking about painters and architects. You know, anything that you do that is an art. Even your family is an art. The art of raising children, or being a father, or being a husband, or being a wife. There's an art to it.
Sure.
You know, and that's what we create. We create as good parents or good husband, wives. We create a happy home. That's a creation, you know, that is probably the most important creation you could ever make.
Absolutely.
You know? And, you know, because then you become as dad. You know, he was, you know, when you pass on, that's what's left behind.
Yeah.
That creation that you make, you know. And that, if you have children, then we use that as your model, as their inspiration for them to create another wonderful family of their own, you know, because that's what they know. That's the reference, you know. So it is so important, you know, to actually get to talk about how these wonderful creations were inspired, you know, by, you know, like, for example, talking to Doug Pinnick about his early days.
Yes.
You know, what did he listen to? What was in his family? What were the family listening to? What was his environment? Did they inspire you to be a better musician, better singer? Then, of course, he had his own history, his own journey talking about that.
Right.
So, you know, I find that the podcasting to be cathartic, because the more you learn about other people, the more you can dig in and find that you have in common with them. How much are we alike brings this planet together as people. You know, as you travel around the world, you realize even you know, like, let's say my first time I traveled to Russia, I you know, and I was a kid that was raised during the Cold War. As a matter of fact, I left my country because of communism.
Right.
You know, so it's like, here I go to Russia and I find out that Russian people wanted exactly the same thing as I do.
Oh yeah.
You know, they wanted to raise their family. They wanted a better life. They wanted to live in freedom. They wanted to express themselves. They wanted to rock. So it's like, oh wow, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, the Cold
Because
War skewed everybody's perception of that, but people are people, and and it's funny how history changes. Like you get so caught up in the news and what, not to sound conspiratorial, but what the government and the is telling you and what life should be and what you should think. But in the course of time, people go on and things change. Like I was in the Army, almost 30 years ago. And at the time, the Soviet Union had just collapsed and in the Berlin Wall had just come down, and I was stationed over in Germany, and they were at some point towards the end, and this would have been a little bit later, it's been like maybe 92 or so, they were going to send some of us into Moscow to help like relief planes sending supplies into Russia. Mm-hmm. Now at that time it was going to be very novel. I was thinking, holy cow, I'm going to be a uniformed U.S. soldier in the Soviet, like in Moscow. That's almost unheard of to be in what was the Soviet Union. Now, when you look at it, you pan back and look at the long picture. If somebody take a longer look at history, it could be very well the Soviet Union will go down as an experiment that lasted for maybe 65 years. That's not very long in the span of time, but it was that was the ever-present thing when we grew up. You and me, even though we're different ages, that was the defining America and the Soviet Union, defined the whole part since World War II on. But it's gone, and of course there's still issues, but they really wasn't a very long-lived thing in the big scope.
Yes, and what I find really interesting, and again, I have references that other people do not have. Such as living in a communist country.
Right. Yeah. Coming from Cuba, you've got a different perspective. Yes.
Yeah. So my reference is that it's not a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You can say better than most. Absolutely.
And if you don't believe me, well, look at the country that was the birthplace of communism. It's not communist anymore. Right. So why should anybody else think that this is a really good idea? I can't wrap my head around that.
I can't either. I can't either. And even, and not to get into politics, even like the hardcore socialism, it's not working out very well for Venezuela right now.
No, absolutely. If you look at China, yes, it is a dictatorship, but their model is not exactly what China used to be.
No.
It's if you look at the people living there, it's one of the most capitalist countries.
Absolutely. They're
more capitalist than communist. I mean, it's communist because it's, there's certain laws that prohibits individuals, certain, human rights.
Right.
Yes, that's the communist part of it. But as far as it being what Mao Zedong actually had in mind, it is not.
It is not pure to his vision at all. What they're doing, and I get it, but they are trying to have their cake and eat it too. They want to want to pay lip service to communism, but they are full bore on exploding their products into the world and trading. So yeah, it's definitely a case of cake and eat it too.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was your political essay with Peter Harris and Rudy Sarzo.
It's and I am the least political guy because I don't believe in politicians.
Sure.
I really do not believe in politicians at all. It's anybody who is going to get up there and make promises that they know they cannot keep. How can I trust them?
Right.
So it's like I am in the politics of music.
Sure.
That's my politics.
That's a pretty good platform. I can deal with that.
Yeah, because after all, we musicians, what we do, a true musician is looking for the truth within their music, whether it's a message, a statement, or a discovery, a self-discovery, which is part of our musical journey. That's what I believe in. And of course, religion. I'm a Christian,
Right.
But that's, to me, that's a whole different spectrum. It's a higher and deeper. It's up and it's within.
Right. And even in music,
spiritual is. Yeah,
Go ahead.
but I find I'm talking on a mundane level. Music is my politic.
Right. And talk about music being your politics. People sometimes try to divide that musical politics into different parties per se, but you shouldn't isolate yourself into whatever your favorite genre is. Like you can be a fan of music and you can have your preferred genre, but at some point in your life, if you're really devoted to music, you can appreciate that Karen Carpenter had a fantastic voice, and the guys from the Motown school were phenomenal songwriters. And you can still like, Testament and Slayer, and and you can like, good pop songs. You can appreciate what's good. It doesn't make you,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. To actually go, because I know that you like to go out of sequence. It's almost like watching a Tarantino movie.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's like going back to my experience with a podcast. So, I had the podcast. I still do. But, so I get a contact, from the person that owns Monsters of Rock Radio on this app. It's called the Dash Radio app, which I didn't even knew that it existed.
Right.
But it just happened to have, the same kind of like the same name as my podcast, right?
Okay, yeah.
So he offers me a show. So now on Sundays I'm on from 4 to 7 Pacific Standard Time on Monsters of Rock Radio on my show is called 6 Degrees of Sarzo,
Gotcha.
which is part podcast and part, we play music, rock, metal, actually,
Right.
because it's Monsters of Rock. And so that came about because of my podcast. And now I actually have a real radio show.
Awesome.
Which is a little bit, it's very challenging because right now we've had a conversation and we've been talking for about an hour, right? More or less. And once you do a radio show, you have to segment it.
Yeah.
You have to do ideally, according to my producer, he would like about 3 minutes of a conversation on a subject. And then we play three songs and then we come back. And what happens is, for example, I just did a segment with Tracy Guns.
Yeah.
When you get together with a musician, especially somebody that you have toured with, Tracy and I, before he rejoined LA Guns, we had a band called Gunzo for about a year and a half, and we did touring. We were for real. We went out there and we did it. So we know each other pretty well. Once you are talking to a bandmate,
it's hard.
You can't ask them a question. Yeah, and just in 3 minutes, wrap it up in 3 minutes. You can't do that because the individual is very comfortable and they're going to elaborate on whatever subject you happen to start.
Sure.
A conversation with. So so those segments become like 10-minute, 15-minute segments.
Right. And
so
on the radio, you have. Yeah, I was in radio briefly, and I did on a rock station. It was actually out of Cincinnati, so I used to joke I'm finally on WKRP. But we did the morning show, and I had a co-host. Now, occasionally, when the co-host would not be there, I had the hardest time feeling comfortable by myself. Just like, okay, now I've just got to go into this break, and and just be interesting. It's much easier to bounce off somebody for me. It's hard to come.
Absolutely.
It's hard to come across and just sit, and I'm not the, hey, you're listening to what, and it's not necessarily my style to do that. So it's hard to be sound inspiring by yourself, and maybe it doesn't come across that way on the radio, but I felt very uncomfortable by myself. It's much easier to have a co-host, but
yeah. As a matter of fact, tomorrow, because my first show was about 2 weeks ago, and they're going to do an encore presentation of the first show I did, which was with Frankie Banali.
Yeah.
Which again is somebody that when we started talking,
Oh, of course.
we just
You guys go
we
way
spoke
back.
about something for 15 minutes. Yeah, and so that's going to re-air tomorrow from 4 to 7 Pacific Standard, and then on the 6th of January, it's the Tracy Guns segment of the show, Six
I'll check
Degrees of
those out
Sarzo.
for sure.
And,
6 degrees of Sarzo.
Yeah, and it's great because I mean, I'm talking with my friends, guys that I to go to a Starbucks and sit around and talk about the same things, or in the bus, or backstage waiting to go on, so it's basically in conversation that we have. It's very candid,
Right, but that's the best kind. I love that. To me, that's endlessly fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, Rudy, this has been go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was saying that I actually have a mass communication background because that was my major in college.
Oh,
back
okay.
Back in the early 70s. So I do have a sense of what a DJ must do,
sure.
In a conversation. But then again, I can't do that to my friends or my colleagues because, there's a comfort level that we have because now I'm not really a DJ. I'm a musician. I'm a peer.
Right.
And we're just having a peer-to-peer conversation,
No, that makes perfect sense. It's hard to adapt a pure interviewer role with somebody you're very familiar with and know personally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, have you ever watched the Dan Rather interviews that he has on Axe TV?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and sometimes I look at him and I go, he looks like far away, like he's not really connecting
Absolutely,
with the individual, and he's just asking a question. He could be asking the ambassador from Turkey.
Right.
Yeah,
that's not, I mean,
Robert Plant.
I watched, like, for instance, his one with Geddy Lee and all that, and the questions are good, but it's not the deep. Yeah, it's for mass consumption. It's not.
Let me tell you what I do is I look at the individual, and I say, you know what, you and I, we have a lot in common, so much in common because you've been through the same thing that I've been through, but I want to see what your experience with it is. And sometimes, they'll come up and say something, and then I'll reference this. Well, yeah, actually, but mine was like this,
Right.
Or if it's guys that I've actually toured and recorded with, then we're kind of like reminiscent about mutual experiences, And I find it fascinating. I find it that each individual, and in my podcast, not on the 6 Degrees of Sarzo, but on the actual podcast that I do, I do podcasts with actors, comedians, all walks of life, not necessarily musicians, because I find that there is a gold mine of humanity in each one of our lives, and it's just a matter of talking about what our journey has been like up to this moment. Right.
And that's always fascinating, right? Because you can learn something, even if it's something trivial. I find things like that just so interesting and compelling.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which again, so the triviality doesn't really exist. It's just because it is fascinating after all.
Right. Yeah. I say trivial in a good way for me because I
I
like the nuts and bolts of everyday life and
absolutely.
Yeah,
exactly, nuts and bolts. If you have a bolt that's missing in an engine, it's going to blow up.
Right. So the small things are crucial. That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. Well, cool. Well, Rudy, this has been fascinating. And like I said before, I am tremendously honored to talk to you and have you on. And it's been great to pick your brain, I guess, a little bit about everything. And you've been a huge part of rock history and fun.
Yeah. And I really appreciate what you're doing. And I really appreciate it when guests come on my show, whether it's the podcast or 6 Degrees of Sarzo, because what we're doing is we're taking something that is very emotionally deep within us, which is the history of rock. Because whether you're a musician or where you are a listener, this is the soundtrack of our lives. I mean, as a musician, I have a certain soundtrack which is very similar to yours, because even though I play metal and I listen to metal, or at least the founding fathers of metal,
sure,
I also listen to it. I grew up with everything. I grew up in a top 40 world that I had to play top 40, and I'm a fan, as much of a fan of Karen Carpenter as and of Deep Purple.
Oh, you had to play top 40 with your brother Robert.
Actually, yeah, we did some.
Yeah,
we did
in
some
Jersey, right?
back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
All right, Rudy, I want to thank you again so much for appearing. It's been a tremendous honor, and it's been great hearing what you're up to these days. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye-bye.